Hello and welcome to Julie Hall Designs. Today I'm going to share with you the next in the You Do You pouch collection. Now this collection is all about buying a single set of designs and finding multiple ways to use them. And I really think you are going to love today's pouch. This is the 5x7 horizontal pouch with a size 3 zipper. And I've come through and I have added in a front flap and a piece of fabric so that it is now a little clutch. I think this is one of the best ones. We have actually given the front flap design as part of the You Do You pouch collection, so you will be able to go through and make this in any of the sizes for yourself. Okay, let's have a look at how to get started. Let's start by looking at what we need. So we need a front and back piece of fabric, and I'm using a pleather fabric. What I've done is I've cut these about an inch bigger than the size of my pouch, which is going to be 5x7 or 130 by 180. And then I've come through and I've just folded the edge down of one of those pieces. I've also got lining fabric, and I've done the exact same thing. I've folded one of those edges down and the other one is plain. I've got a piece of embroiderer's felt which I'm going to use to create the flap, and again, now using that size of the pouch, I've made it wider and then I've cut a double length. So for me this one is 26 by 20 centimeters, fold it over, and that's going to be our extra front pocket. We've got our zipper, and then I've got an extra piece of fabric that we're going to create the flap with. And this is larger size than what I need because the flap's actually quite small, but it was what was left over out of my fabrics. So now we are ready to stitch, and I'll come along to my machine, and the first thing that we're going to create is the flap. Now if you've purchased the You Do You designs, you'll notice there was an update, and every time I do something unique like this, I'm giving you guys this design so that you can make the exact same project. And so the first thing we've got is the outline of what is going to be that fold over flap. And I'm just going to lay some embroiderer's felt over that, and then come through with my gorgeous fabric and stitch colorway 2. I'm just going to hold that down. Colorway 3 is going to quilt through this. Now you don't have to quilt through it if you don't want to, but again I think it just adds that little bit of an extra element. can see it's a beautiful quilting design. I'm just going to speed that up just a little bit. And I like mixing things up because this is such a angular graphic print. Doing a swirly design on top of that adds an extra degree of interest. Okay, so that's our quilting done. Now all I'm going to do is put the backing on this piece. Now I'm going to back it with the same fabric, so I'm going to come through and just lay that fabric over, and so I've come through, I've laid that fabric down, and the last colourway and that first part of the design is done. Let's come through and look at what we've got. Okay, now I'm going to put those fabrics aside for a second, and then take my hoop, remove the excess stabilizer, and trim our piece. So trimming to about 1/4 inch, but I am going to leave more along the top, ready for us to tuck that fabric into the seam of the pouch. And clip my corners, and I'm just going to notch in on the largest part of the curve. And this is all just about getting rid of the excess bulk. Okay, so now that I've made a mess of my board, I can come through and turn this right side out, and then I'm going to come through and do the good old roll and press. And what I mean by that is roll that fabric around the edge. Now all of those tack down stitches you can pull out if you wish. But there we have, and then I'm just going to come through and trim that away there. And what we've got is a lovely fold over section ready to be used. Okay, next up, I'm going to get rid of some of my rubbish as I go, because I always leave a terrible mess. Is we're going to come through and we are going to hoop up an extra piece of stabilizer, and then let's come over to the machine. And I need to load up the new design. And send that to my machine. Okay, now here's a really interesting thing to think of when you are doing in the hoop projects. Keep an eye on where the presser foot has and your needle sit and where your design sits. If I flip this design over, it's going to give me a much nicer finishing stitch around the outside of my project. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Okay, and then we get started. Now it's the same 7 colours, and it's just all about how we use them. So the first thing that we do is stitch the outline, which lets us see where all of our fabrics are going to go down, and also where we are going to place our zipper. And I'm using a number 3 zipper, and I've got a little rose tab on that today. I'm just going to move that up so that I can show you the placement that I'm doing with this. And what you can see is that zipper sits beautifully over there, and all we're going to do is, and I keep the rose zipper pull out of the way, just make sure that that does not touch our needle, because surprisingly enough it will break it. And then our next colourway, which is colourway 3, is going to hold down the bottom of the zip. And then we get to have some fun. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to end up with this beautiful little cover here sitting around here. We want that centered as much as we can, and we also, and I'm just going to trim this just a little bit more, want to hide it within that seam. So all we're going to do is center this over and then stitch colorway 4, and then I'm going to go and repeat colorway 4. So that gives us our cover, and I'm going to come back and repeat colorway 4 to now hold down that vinyl. So all we've done here is repeated colorway 4. Next thing we need to do is come through again and attach our lining to the back. So I'm going to flip my project over and I'm going to take my lining and lay it over that outline. Now, if you're a painter's tape person, you can use painter's tape here. What I am attempting to do is just keep my magna pins outside of the stitching area, because remember it's only going to stitch across the top, and then I'm going to return my hoop to the machine. Now as it does this stitch out, the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come through and I'm going to fold that down so that it top stitches itself. And sorry, I've just realised I haven't given you guys a very good view of that. Now, this is starting to get a little bit thick, and I am stopping and starting to make sure that that is firmly pulled down, and you can see how beautifully out of the zipper area it is. Now, it went off the res a little bit there, so I'm just going to pull it back. I'm just going to re-stitch that little bit. Okay, so we now have a beautiful flap here that realistically leads nowhere. So let's come through and look at what we need to do to finish this baby off. First thing I'm going to do is remove these magnets, and I'm going to pull my zipper in to the halfway point there and Then I'm going to come through, and what I want to do is lay this excess folded over piece of fabric with the fold down just at that point where we see the squaring off of the pouch, because I want you to be able to get into the pouch or into the front section. And then we are going to take our lining fabric, our backing fabric, lay the backing fabric, why did I take that hoop off? Lay the backing fabric over all of that, and we're ready to stitch. Now, if you do want some extra stability, you can come through, and I think I do want on this. So I'm actually going to come through and again outside of that stitching area and really just making sure that this stays in the right position. I'm going to pop those magnets on. And then we stitch. So and what we just want to make sure is that everything is all smooth as we go. Okay, so now we are up to our last stitch, which means removing our hoop. Makes it easier for me when I come back, and putting that lining fabric over the back. So, and it's really just a case of make sure your project is covered. Once I've done that, hoop back on, and ready for the last stitch out. Okay, we can now take our hoop out and let's turn to the workbench. Now this one looks like an absolute fat pouch, but that is because we have the magnets inside and we've got that cover. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take the stabilizer out. And then I'm just going to trim. And you guys have seen me do this before, so it's about 1/4 inch trim around everywhere except for where we have the opening. And getting rid of my scraps there, and then I'm also just going to trim anything that is not the lining fabrics. So what we're left with is those 2 lining fabrics, and we're now going to work on turning that inside out. Now remember, there are still magnets inside, so don't worry if you feel something heavy, or if you use painter's tape, you're going to have painter's tape inside. Okay. And I always try and get the corners out at each point that I do this. So pull out the extra stabilizer, and then I can take out my magnets. But the important thing that I want to do here, and for it I'm going to reclose my zip up most of the way, is to come through and do that closure. Now as always, you can of course hand stitch, but I like the no heat basting tape, and very similar to like the sticky heat and bonds and all of those. So we put that on one side and we turn it in. Now when you then line up that second side, pull it through. Now it's always harder trying to do this so that you guys can see than it is when I'm just doing it on my own stuff. But come through, and then when you do your final press of your bag, that is just going to glue it all together. So undo your zipper, and now the final turnout. So what we should have here is a beautiful pouch that has its own pocket. And here we have our finished project. So I've used a cam snap and I've tried to replicate that purple colour. Now I am loving the space that you've got there, as well as all of the space inside the pouch. So we've really doubled that up. It's a great little clutch. Now remember, this is the 5x7 size, so you could make this in whatever size you wanted. And the designs are part of your You Do You pouch collection. I hope you've enjoyed this project, and until next time, have a stitching day. Bye.